Raising women's voices, one story at a time. Welcome to the She Said Project podcast. Welcome to all of our friends in the world of That's What She Said. If you are listening, that means you've probably, seen a show or known someone who was in a show or stumbled across us on the internet. But here on the She Said Project podcast, we love to chat it up with women who have some amazing stories and have said yes to a bold and brave journey of sharing those stories live on stage. This is Jenette Jurczyk. I'm National Director of the She Said Project and your co-host today.
Co-host of
the podcast.
That's right. Well, I'm your co-host and the co-founder, Kerry Rossow, and I am so excited to be here.
This is our 10th season of the She Said Project podcast. We launched the podcast, 4 years ago? 4 years? Yes. With the goal that the podcast would be I see it like the glue that we get to meet with women from different communities that have experienced That's What She Said. And every season we've opened up to one more new community. Because when we started, it was just Champaign-Urbana.
Yep. And the beauty is you get to know these women and you hear their stories and you connect with them, and it's such an intense experience. And then the show is over and everybody, life moves on and you meet a new cast, but it's always in our minds. I wonder how that person's doing. I wonder what happened with XYZ. And so the podcast is really a great way to loop back and check in with people that we really care about.
And we are so privileged that we get to spend this time with them and hear the stories behind the stories and what's happened since. And our listeners are really lucky because they also, maybe they saw the show, maybe they didn't. But we know that every story shared has a ripple effect and can impact you right here, right now, because it's something you need to hear, or it might lodge in your memory and come back one day when you need it the most.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, today's guest she's a rock star, and her story has, I'm not trying to make a pun on what her title was, but it did touch my heart so deeply. And I think about her all the time. So let's bring her on.
This is our first guest from our new That's What She Said community of Naperville, Illinois. Naperville came on the scene with their first show in 2024. And our guest, Ellen Cleary, is so special because not only was she on stage sharing her story that night, but she is one of the partners in crime up there in Naperville and produced this first show and is currently working on her next. So
she did it all.
Ellen, welcome to the She Said Project podcast. We are so happy to have you here today.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me, guys. I appreciate it. It's fun to be here. Quite the introduction.
Ellen and I have quite an interesting story how we found each other. She has a friend who was living, how people come into your life for a season or a reason or a moment. There's a woman here in Champaign. She lived here, and I think she's moved on. She came here for school.
She's closer to me now. She moved back up to the Chicagoland area about 8 weeks ago.
Due to some circumstances, our worlds overlapped. We got to know each other very, very briefly. She and I never really connected, but in our brief interaction, she said, I have a friend who you need to know, and her name is Ellen, and you guys are going to click. And she connected us. And I remember our first phone conversation, Ellen. I was sitting in my car in my garage. We could not stop talking to each other.
And I appreciated that drive because I was stuck on the other side of O'Hare trying to get back to Naperville I was at a networking meeting. I'm like, sure, I'll drive with you. I'll commute with you. And I'm like, wow, I think I met one of my new best friends. Like, when you talk to somebody, it's like you talk to them like you're reconnecting with an old friend. That's what that conversation was like. And I was like, oh, there's something special here. And besides being you, of course, I really think that was the connection around She Said and how important it is, right, for us to be speaking our truths and owning our truths and being comfortable with other people knowing who we are. And just we connected on such a deep level over the importance of that kind of honor for ourselves and for our neighbors that it was, I don't know. From day one, I've always felt that.
Right out of the gate. And even though we live more than 2, almost 3 hours apart, Ellen kept showing up. She supported our show. She would show up for our show. She came down for some, she said, pre-parties. I mean, she just kept showing up because she knew she wanted to get involved. And when the opportunity came to bring That's What She Said to Naperville. Oh boy, did she.
Yeah, exactly. Like I said, I really felt like this was something I needed to do right from the beginning. I'm a bit of a chatter, and I like to tell stories in general. It's just sort of the way I roll. But what we were doing with the She Said project and raising people's voices within our community just spoke so perfectly to what was important to me. I've been struck by the need to sort of a desire to change the world in some way or another, and I'm not so full of it that I think that I can change everything about the world. But if I can start in my backyard and make the world a kinder, gentler place for my kiddos, right? That's something that I felt like I could control, and that I could make a difference in a very meaningful way. And I think we did. I think we're there. So I'm excited about the opportunity. I'm so glad that we got a chance to share what was kind of a hard story for me to share, because I tend to pursue humor, and I tend to pursue, distraction. And I really thought it was important for me to stretch myself and let people in on something about, foundational about who I am and how I got here, and trust my community to support me through it.
That's funny because I was thinking yours was going to be funny just from my impression. And I loved because, I typically seek out the funny and find the funny also. And so then when I heard your story, it was just so touching. And I was so glad that you had gone against what others also probably expected. It was the unexpected story, and it was really beautiful. But maybe it's time to share the story with everybody.
Absolutely. That's What She Said Naperville was one of the very first shows that I wasn't involved in directing or producing. I got to go up and spend the day with them and sit in the audience and cheer them on. And also knowing Ellen going into the producing process, didn't know her story, was completely surprised by what you brought to the stage, and got to experience that feeling that the audience gets hearing it for the first time. And so for our listeners here on the podcast, we want you to have that experience too. So whether you saw Ellen's live performance or not, get ready, because this one's going to knock your socks off. So we're going to take a listen to Ellen's performance from that fateful night on stage, and That's What She Said Naperville 2024, with her story, Connected at the Heart. Enjoy.
My only sibling was born exactly 18 months and 2 days after me. Her entry into this world was unexpected and a bit dramatic. Back in the olden days, they didn't have the technology to know anything about a baby before she arrived in the world. So the fact that the baby was a girl was just as surprising to my parents and to the doctors as the fact that she had an extra chromosome in her 21st pair. Kate was born with Down syndrome. My earliest memories feature Kate prominently. I vividly recall sitting in the waiting room at Huntington Hospital while my parents got her admitted to the pediatric ward. You see, our lives revolved around Kate's health by necessity. She had 7 bouts of pneumonia and 2 strokes before the age of 3 due to an underlying heart condition they also did not have the technology to understand. But my memory of that time is not of her being sick. It's not of my parents being worried. It's a core memory of tiny me. I'm sitting on a love seat with these really thin vinyl cushions, and I'm so small that my legs don't hang down, they just stick straight out. I don't wander, I don't cry. No one hands me a toy, no one tries to distract me. I just sit, and I wait. Because even at 3 years old, I understand the assignment. Sit, wait, you'll be back. And they always were, always. And life went on in my childhood, with our family focused on Kate's fragile medical state. Now, although we were not your typical siblings, we were very, very close. I included her in our neighborhood fun whenever I could. Now, I grew up in Long Island, and all the houses in our neighborhood had the same basic floor plan. It was a bit of a circle, and if you started on the far side of the kitchen, you could reach maximum velocity by the time you moved into the living room. And that was one of our favorite rainy day games. And specifically, our favorite rainy day game was to set Kate up as a hurdle in the living room, and my friends and I would leap over her as we ran our laps. Now, she loved that, but probably because she was a very low hurdle for us to clear. But then it would be her turn, right? And she would, get ready to take her lap, and we'd all lie down on the floor one by one, and she'd come around eventually, and she'd flash a big smile as she'd step carefully over each one of us. And then she'd collapse breathlessly next to me in a fit of giggles. It was great. At night, we were always together, always. And I just cherished her. Right from the start, she was my heart, my very own sweet baby. And we never fought, which is not entirely true. I punched her once, exactly once, in frustration. Mom and Dad had gone out, and I was stuck there. So I punched her. And she looked at me with these shocked eyes and walked out of the room. And then about a minute later, she came back in and crawled in my lap and apologized. Which was exactly the response I did not want, right? Not at all. I was going through some throes of preteen angst. And more than anything, I just wanted to fight, right? I wanted somebody maybe even to punch me back. But she didn't. She never would have. She always accepted my frustration, my pain, my absurdity with grace. I cried big tears that afternoon, and I begged her to forgive me. We watched The Sound of Music again. And we cuddled up in the same lazy boy recliner like we did so many times before. And for the record, I never put my hands on her again. Not one time. Her simple ability to forgive without question taught me lessons that have stuck with me for a lifetime. I don't hold grudges, and with rare exception, I always take the high road, even when the low road is perhaps the easier or more obvious choice. I lead with grace and kindness and acceptance today because of that stubborn redhead with a joyful spirit and a very forgiving heart. Throughout our teen years, Kate's health ebbed and flowed. When I was in middle school, she collapsed in her classroom. Her heart was no longer pumping blood effectively, and she needed a pacemaker. Kate spent 6 weeks in a cardiac hospital, going through multiple surgeries and extended periods in isolation to ward off infection. Honestly, nothing was ever simple about her health. And the entire time that she was in that hospital, I could feel her pain in my body. Every waking moment, my heart ached, both metaphorically and physically. Now, one evening in April, Kate was scheduled to go into yet another surgery. And my parents decided it was really important for me to attend the birthday party of the season. Now, as an adult, of course, I understand they probably just needed some alone time, right? I get it. But at the time, it was a really strange edict. Go to a party. Really? Okay, I will. As Daddy and I were driving home on the parkway, that crushing pain in my chest, the one that I have felt ever since she's entered that hospital, it vanished. It was gone. And my heart, it sank. Daddy, something is wrong. I can't feel her. And he looked over at me and was completely confused. And I'm pretty sure this is the first time that I uttered these exact words out loud. I think she's dying. He called the hospital when we got back to the house. She was in surgery by then, and I came to believe that my loss of that physical connection was due to anesthesia. She wasn't in pain any longer, so neither was I. And I probably should talk about the party a little bit. I don't remember it. What I really remember about the party is that the birthday girl's mother was exceptionally kind to me that night. As my high school graduation approached, I realized I needed to get away, to take steps to become my own person. I applied to 11 colleges, and I ultimately chose the one that was 1,000 miles away from home, on purpose. Honestly, I just needed some space to breathe. Once I moved out, Kate realized that she could leave too. And she began having daily conversations with Jack and Janet, her imaginary roommates, and talked nonstop about the really fun times they were having every night at the Regal Beagle. To their credit, my parents understood that what Kate was really craving was more independence, and they began the process of finding her a group home where she too could spread her wings. Unlike me, of course, she was accepted by the first community she interviewed with, and she actually got her first apartment while I was still living in a dorm. Several years later, it really all runs together now. Kate suffered a massive stroke while showering in that apartment. It impacted her hearing and her speech. And for a while, she still tried to talk to us, but over time, we think she just got mad that nobody was talking to her, and she became silent. After college, I took a job in publishing, and in December of 1993, I began a planes, trains, and automobiles-like journey to spend Christmas with my parents, who were then retired and living in Florida, like all good New Yorkers. I went from O'Hare to Logan to Albany, where Kate was living. And when I entered her home, she smiled when she saw me. She gave me a big hug. But I could tell something was radically different from the second I walked in. After a restless night on yet another vinyl sofa, we boarded a plane together, and that holiday week was strange and awkward. My parents seemed oblivious to the changes in her, changes that screamed like a neon sign to me. And so I said it out loud again to make sure they understood. Mommy, Daddy, this is our last Christmas together. Kate is dying. A few days after Christmas, Kate and I left Florida together. We settled into the last row of a very dark airplane, and we were as alone as we would ever be. I looked at her, and I shook my head, and I just said, I can't. And she put her hands on my face, and she drew me to her chest, and she stroked my hair as I cried. And I worked towards acceptance. The call came to my cubicle late in the workday on February 28th, 1994. Kate was in the ER. Her heart had stopped, and they were trying to revive her. As we had agreed as a family more than a decade earlier, the doctors had 1 minute to bring her back, and then they had to let her go. So, I said resolutely, she's gone now. Yes, my mom replied, she's gone. Are you okay? I asked them. And they replied in unison, no. Are you okay? And I took a deep breath, and I steadily replied, yes, I'm okay. Because just as it had been some 25 years earlier, I understood the assignment. This time foisted on me, by me, and by Kate. We had come to a wordless understanding on that flight from Tampa to Albany. She would leave, and I would take care of them. I would not let them fall apart, and I would make them proud for both of us. It's been 30 years now since I looked into those deep blue eyes that held me in such regard. I have spent now more years without her than I ever did with her. But she is with me daily in how I listen and how I make space for other people's pain, in how I parent and how I still daughter, in my smile, in my patience, in my silliness, and yes, in my candor, in absolutely everything I do. She is always right here. Thank you.
Bawling over here. I need a tissue.
That, it was just so touching in every way and beautiful. And it really felt like an honor to hear that story and what was so deeply personal to you and your family. And
And what a beautiful tribute to your sister.
yeah.
Oh, thanks, guys. I appreciate it. Yeah, for me, that was very meaningful. As you guys know, I lost my sister in 1994, but she's always part of everything I do, and how I think about things. What was really special for me was having my mom in the audience and also my daughter, who doesn't really know that much about her Aunt Kate. I mean, she knows about her, but not like in that kind of deep, meaningful way, in a way that makes her understand me better. So having two important women in the audience to hear that story, that was another big thing for me too.
To get to go through that with you, that
Yeah.
really can connect you to people in your life when you are that vulnerable. There's no other way around it.
How old is your daughter?
She just turned 13.
Well, I was wondering about that because I think, sometimes there's that story or that glimpse into your mom before she was your mom and thinking, that aha moment of like, she's just a girl. And like, I'm sure that was really powerful for her to hear you tell that story of, the before mom land.
I think it was. I mean, I think it might have been a little bit more powerful for me. I think it's one of those things that she might reflect on later on in life and go, wow. But just being able to share that experience with her in general, not just my story, but the experience of, these are 9 women on stage, owning who they are, telling their truth, trusting us with that. That was a big deal for me, because one of the things I really want to do as a mom, as a parent, is to make sure that she has her voice, that she knows that it's okay to share herself authentically with other people. And if they don't like it, that's their problem, not hers. We're working really, really strongly right now on the importance of belonging versus just fitting in. And and that's a lot of where my lessons are coming from. And I can't hit her over the head with those lessons. I can't say, hey, let's belong, honey. Let's not just fit in. So I try to, we all talk about leading by example. That's one way I try to do it. See what these other people said too. See what mom's willing to say. That's important to me, that we represent in a pretty strong way. That powerful women tell powerful stories. They trust people with information. They don't tell them every little thing, of course, but at the same time, they're willing to go there. They're willing to take a chance, and they're going to come out better on the other side for it. If somebody doesn't connect with you, hey, that's their loss, because you're pretty amazing. That's the lesson that I like to have her get repeated in her ears one way or another, pretty close to every day of the week.
Well, and even if she isn't hearing the words or they don't land until later, I always think that about my kids. They're watching, and it makes me, when I want to take the low road, and and I'm like, but that road would be so much fun. I got it all in my head what to say, but I don't, because I know our kids are watching.
Yeah. That adage of focusing on the outcome you want is really helpful when you have that perfect quip that I too, Kerry, do not share most times.
Just in the shower in the morning.
Oh, yeah.
That is our
For
quality
sure.
time. I do love how you pointed out that fitting in and belonging are not one and the same, and belonging is something that comes from within. It's not something you seek outside of yourself. I mean, I could have a whole Brene Brown moment here, but I love the choice of that word, and it's so true. It's believing in yourself and finding who you are and where you belong for yourself, and not relying on other people. You're in those junior high years, and my dear friend, so am I. So I fully understand.
Thoughts and prayers, girls. Thoughts and prayers.
Are we going to make it, Carrie?
Yes.
There's a light at the
Honestly,
end of this
13
tunnel.
so far is better than 12. I'll buy a whole bunch. So.
Good. I need to get there. We're working on it.
Yes.
We're working on it. Tell us about your experience as a producer. Like, this is, your story, the moment with your mom and everything, but you did a lot of work leading up to that one night.
Yes, so it's a lot of work, Jenette. It's a whole lot of work, and
I've heard.
It's surprising. Like, it's amazing. Like, you can't just go, okay, let's do a show next week. From identifying and courting sponsors so you can do a quality show and have the support that you need from the community, to finding the right speakers and understanding the order to put them in so that your show flows really beautifully. You don't leave people with the impression that they're, at a funeral. It's a really, really amazing journey that we went on to get there. There are so many details and so many things that I'm much more of a business person than I am a theater type like you folks are. But luckily, my co-producer, Lisa, is much more, theatery.
Yeah, you guys were
She's
an
much more of a
excellent.
showboater than me.
You guys were
And
an
so we
excellent
made a
pair.
good team that way.
Yeah, you two were an excellent pair, and you complemented each other very well.
Yeah, it's always been really important to us to have that ebb and flow of stories because that is reflective of what our lives are, right? Sometimes our lives are funny, sometimes they're serious, then sometimes there's a great meaning in just the humdrum of everyday life. And you guys really nailed it on making sure you represented that whole spectrum.
I appreciate you saying that. It's not something that I had thought about until we were, in the moment working with the cast. And I was both a member of the cast, but, you flip your hat around depending on whether you're standing in front of the room or listening to the stories and supporting your fellow castmates. And, having my producer hat on, it was like, oh, this person should open. Oh, this person should be in. We became really clear. And so Lisa actually presented me with an order that she had come up with from working really closely with the other cast members. And it was almost identical to the one that I had, written down on my own. I was like, yep, aligned perfectly, because we really wanted that. I mean, the gal who went after me in the cast told a very, very funny story that really lifted the mood of the room, where mine was maybe a little bit more emotional. Hers was, Jenette, what would you say? Not that emotional.
No, you need the levity to lighten the room. After you can't have an audience sitting there in these dark moments for an hour or 2 hours. You create that balance. Yeah. And people ask me all the time, well, how do you know what the order is going to be? And I always say it will reveal itself. It always does.
And it 100% did.
Yep.
100% did. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't put any pressure on myself to have that too soon. By the time every story is, getting to the point where it's finalized and we're a couple weeks out and we're listening to the stories, the order shows itself and it makes sense because that's what we want. We want that tapestry of emotions that we weave together. And that's the fun of being the director and the producer. It's, there are so many moving parts, that you have to put together, but watching these women go through this process and find their stories, and then you get to be the puppet master, putting all the pieces together for the final result. It's exhilarating, I think.
100% agree. And, and I didn't realize it would be like that. I knew that the stories needed to balance each other out. I knew that we wanted to represent our community with, with the people we invited to be on stage. We wanted it to be representative of that. And their stories just emerged from them as we were going through it. So many of them changed. My story changed dramatically from the first time that I was working on it to when I finally delivered it on stage. It's such a process and such a growth process for all. I tell you, when I talked to the cast members, a couple of them have said to me, well, you've kind of wrecked my life because now I need more from what I was doing. I can't go back to just getting through. I have to be, out there participating, doing all this stuff. And we have a group text that we share regularly still as a unit. And it's always like, okay, who's messed up my life today?
I love that.
Support me do this. It's pretty funny. But, we did create this sisterhood. It's nice.
What was the feedback you got from your family and community and your pals afterward?
Well, nice story. I mentioned that my mom and my daughter were in the audience. Two of my high school girlfriends flew in from New York for it, which was really amazing. Oh. And so they were in the audience. A number of my college friends were in the audience. And certainly a lot of members of the community that I knew. So that was tremendous just to have it there. I was less nervous about standing on stage. I love a microphone. I'm like Jenette. I really love a microphone. So I was not stressed out about that. But when I had to release that to the YouTube, like on social media, I nearly passed out. Like the anxiety level was so high.
Really?
Yeah, it was really funny. And I was glad that at least one of our other cast members had the same exact reaction. It's just like, okay, yeah, well, I don't know whether you can there's only 400 or 500 people in the room, Kerry. So, if they hated me, that would be done and over with in 10 minutes. But the internet lives forever. So that was hard. But one of the cool things about that, my babysitter, who babysat both me and Kate, when we were little, she actually was waiting for it. She commented on the YouTube page. Then she sent it to her brother, who was in my high school class. And long story short, he got in touch with me. He came to my high school reunion this summer because of the story I told on stage.
What?
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And so, it was amazing. So essentially my entire high school class in New York has seen it now too. I've had people reach out to me and just tell me how much, either that they remembered my sister, they remember that, or they're like, wow, I didn't realize that while we were busy being teenagers and doing crazy things, you were also living this life. And I was like, yeah, wow. So it was really quite personally gratifying. I will say an unexpected gift that particular night was in the lobby after the show. We were taking pictures in the photo booth and doing having a glass of wine with people and getting our congratulations and hugs and all that kind of stuff. Woman I'd never laid eyes on before came up to me and said, I need to talk to you. And I said, okay, what's up? And she said, I loved your story. I said, oh, thank you. And I thought it was just going to be one of those things. And she said, my son has Down syndrome. And I said, oh, okay. And she said, I've never thought about how my daughter relates to this before. And now I understand it so much better. And I was like, ooh, I didn't know I could do that too. So that was oh my goodness, I made a difference in somebody's daughter's life, and she doesn't even know it.
You made a difference
too young to even realize it.
in her life, like that night. That's like instant gratification, if you will. But that just is one example to show you that's someone who heard you in that moment. So be proud of the fact that you put it out on the internet, because there are more people who need to hear that story, who can empathize and sympathize with you and learn from you and take it back home and ask questions and connect with their sisters and children in new ways. That's the magic of what we get to do, the magic of storytelling. There's one particular line that is in your story, and I watched it again on the internets, in preparation for our conversation today, and I found myself not just tearing up, but I mean full on bawling in my office today. And when you came to peace, you came to terms with letting Kate go, and you knew you had to be the one to be strong for your mom and dad. And I don't even know if I'm going to be able to say the line, but when you said, because I saved this on purpose for the end of the podcast, when you said it is up to me now to go out and make them proud for both of us.
Yeah.
And I want to be the one here to say to you, Ellen Cleary, that you're doing it. I am so proud of you. I know Mom is proud of you, and I know Kate's proud of you.
Yeah, I do too. That was a realization I came to when I was doing the story. I mean, I always knew that it was in the background, but as I did it, it was like, wow, no, it was. She passed it to me. On that plane ride, it was my turn. She would leave. I would stay. I would take care of them. I would make them proud for both of us. And it's funny because I didn't listen to that part of the story because it makes me emotional too. But it's true. And yeah, if I can live my life in a way that makes my family proud of me for both of us, yeah, it's good. It's all good.
Well, I'm just done now. I'm just done. I'm like stick a fork.
We're going to go over to the local bar now.
Now I'm just mad that we're not doing this together, Kerry.
Well, I can't wait to see what happens next, because you are just a force and just an amazing person.
Well, we're full steam ahead for 2025 right now. We are in the throes of casting. I've talked to a number of people about that, doing a lot of networking with local organizations, looking for our nonprofit beneficiary as well too, and working through a whole bunch of stuff. But it's great to be part of this community. I'm very honored to have worked with Lisa to launch this in Naperville in 2024.
Well, we are honored and thrilled that you are in the She Said sphere, in the family, and now here on the podcast. So thank you for keeping the mission moving forward. There are so many women who are going to benefit because of your gifts and your passion. Ellen, we just did and will continue to. So we're so grateful for everyone who makes the She Said Project podcast possible. This was created in partnership with Illinois Public Media. We're here in their awesome studios. We owe a huge thanks to Sterling Wealth Management and Carl Health Alliance. I mean, we are sitting here in Champaign-Urbana, which is, the flagship, but the mission of That's What She Said has gone so much further and continues to grow. And because of women like you, Ellen, who stood up and said yes. And we're grateful. And thank you for joining us. And it's just a time to celebrate here on the She Said Project podcast.
Thank you, Ellen.
Thank you both. I appreciate you.
Bye. Over and out.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the She Said Project podcast in partnership with Illinois Public Media. All materials contained in the podcast are the exclusive property of the She Said Project and That's What She Said, LLC. For more information on our live shows, go to shesaidproject.com. This podcast was made possible with support from Carl and Health Alliance and presented by Sterling Wealth Management, empowering women to live their best lives.